Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Strictly Hockey Talk. I'm your host, Nick Bondi, joined by the usual gang of suspects, Tambier. No Brian today, but KD is back with us after a brief hiatus. KD, I don't the fans have not heard from you from a while. Like, how you been?
I've been good, man. It's been a crazy past couple of weeks for me for sure. I know last week we lost to North Delta legend and John Garrett, so I just kind of quickly want to start off by giving a personal story I had with him. Me being from North Delta as well. I seen him a couple times, but my most memorable memory of him was at a Safeway. I was just a little kid. I had a Kit Kat in my hand, just doing some goofy stuff as a kid would. And I had a Canucks jersey on. I had a Ryan Kesler jersey out of all jerseys on. And he ended up getting me that Kit Kat. And he was like, "Kid, just listen to your parents and stay in school." And that just the day he died, I just remember that message and obviously, tribute to Cheech and farewell to condolences to his family and whatnot. But yeah, I'm excited to get things going here and excited to be back.
Well said, well said. Tambier, how you doing, man?
Well, first off, it's great to see Katie back on the show. It's been a while since we've talked hockey and just talk about the Canucks in general. And I'm good, man. Just I don't even know how to explain the feelings that I had after that lottery. Um, but ultimately, year one of a 5 to 8 year process for the Canucks. It feels like the Canucks have been bad for 50 years, which I guess they sort of have. But growing up, West Coast Express 2011, I was used to seeing the Canucks be in the playoffs basically almost every year. And ever since that era of Canucks teams, they've been it's like they're cursed, especially the last decade plus. Um, and we'll let's get into it, boys. Let's get into it.
So, if people aren't aware or been living under a rock, the Canucks did not win the draft lottery. Of all teams to win it, of all the goddamn fucking teams to win it, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. It had to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. And of all the teams, I could have stomached like pretty much any other team winning it. The Leafs. I felt empty afterwards. I felt empty afterwards. After that, I felt like when when Canada lost the gold medal game. I felt like that kind of emptiness afterwards. I'm just staring at the screen, being like, no, this can't be happening. It can't be the Leafs. It can't be the Leafs. They have this terrible season, first year in the draft lottery in however many years, and they immediately get a first overall pick. Right? It's not fair. It's not fair. I was angry. I was upset. I'm still upset to this day. The only thing I'm holding out hope for is, John Chaika overthinking galaxy braining it and, screwing up the pick somehow, or maybe doing some illegal shit from now until the draft lottery that the Leafs are gonna get the pick taken away. That's what I'm holding out for. It could still happen because John Chaika, we know the history of John Chaika, and we can get to that hiring. By the way, did you see the press conference? The press conference was insane. That Steve Simmons question, especially, pretty much just calling him a fraud and a liar, right? Right at the
He
press
couldn't even
conference
answer.
was,
His big boss had to answer for
yeah, it
him.
was it was ridiculous. But back to the draft lottery, yeah, it was upset. And here's my theory on it. Okay, here's my theory on how the draft lottery played out. Okay, Sportsnet just paid the NHL however many $1 billion, right, to broadcast games for the next 12 years. Rogers owns Sportsnet. Who owns the Leafs?
Yeah.
Rogers, right? You don't think there's something going on there? You don't think, the NHL is like, hey, thanks for giving us $4 billion to broadcast your games. Yeah, we'll slide you a first overall pick. Thank you for the trouble, right?
Yeah.
And the number they needed to win. They needed one number, 12. How long is the contract for their next TV deal?
12.
12 years. I'm just
That's
saying. I don't know, man. Something's fishy going on. You guys ever watch Better Call Saul? You
yeah.
can you can you can
Well,
manipulate ping pong balls with weights. It can happen. Can't
Yeah.
don't say they cut away to commercial before
Yeah.
the last ball, right?
Okay. I think thinking it's rigged sometimes can just come across as, you know, I guess petty.
There's something here. There's something here.
For sure, but I understand your point of view. I get it. It's very easy to just believe that the Leafs and the league rigged it because at the end of the day, the Leafs bring in
Money
viewership,
talks.
money
Money
talk.
talks.
If this was planned out, they would have to be planning this out for years before because they knew that Mitch Marner wasn't going to come back, right? They probably had an inkling of a possibility that the Leafs weren't going to make the playoffs, right? And when he decided not to come back with the Leafs, the contract runs out around the same time Mitch Marner leaves. And out of all teams last year, the New York Islanders win the draft lottery. So if you want to make it look like it's not rigged, you have the Islanders win the draft lottery the year before, and then this year, everyone's complaining that the Leafs won it. So it's like I don't believe it's rigged. I just feel like there's too much money involved for it to be rigged. They had the fifth best odds to win the lottery. That's high enough for me to believe that they could win it. The Islanders won it last year, and they had a less chance to win the lottery last year. It hurts, Nick. I know, I know, I know. I understand.
Why did it have to be that team? Why do they get rewarded for a terrible hire and a terrible season?
Yeah, it's crazy because
You guys ever watch The Sopranos? You know that scene where Christopher is hanging out and like just goes says to Paul, why can't anything, good ever you ever get the feeling that nothing good's ever gonna happen to you?
yeah,
That's me being Canucks. Nothing's good ever is gonna happen to this team.
yeah, and also like the 48 hours that the Leafs had, or the 24 hours the Leafs had after that press conference, and the hate that they were getting in the market from the media and some of the fans. And then it just, the next day they win the lottery, and all that hate's just all of a sudden just disappeared. And nobody's even talking about the John Chaika hiring anymore, or, the process of MLSE even hiring Chaika and how terrible of a process that was.
The Canucks have had a better process trying to get their executive than the Leafs,
Yeah.
Really,
which is an insane
almost
thought
the
considering the
hired,
resources of MLSE. And now, not saying the Canucks are going to make the right hire, right? Like they, by all accounts, they almost hired Pierre Dorion as their next GM. So, not saying the results going to be good, but you can see the process. Like they're actually interviewing like competent, smart people.
Yeah.
yeah, they're only, as Katie started to interrupt there, but I think they're only giving the people the time of day if they, tell them that they could turn it around quickly.
That's probably the issue, right? But yeah, it's just and the Sharks moving up as well. Like that wasn't as bad, but the Sharks are going to be a problem in the Pacific Division for a while now,
Yeah.
right? Like you got Celebrini, Michael Misa. They obviously had a pretty decent year this year, right? They were flirting around with one of those wild card spots for the majority of the season, and then just kind of tailed off at the end. But they're gonna add like another piece to it. I mean, I guess we could talk about where the draft lottery, you know, and now that we know the Canucks are picking third, we can kind of delve into what this means for the Canucks specifically. I mean, look, Tampa, you sort of said it. They had a better than 50% chance of picking third. This is always the most likely outcome. So, and given the history of the Canucks and the draft lottery, like it was a good chance they were gonna pick third. We now know for sure they're gonna pick third. Um, there's a lot of around there's a lot of smoke around today, especially after the Leafs get yeah they may they may not take McKenna, they might take Stenberg, or they're gonna take McKenna. All right, there's gonna be maybe the hockey people it's close between McKenna and Stenberg, but I mean we talked about this in previous episodes of the podcast when we thought the Canucks had a chance of getting first and going McKenna. McKenna's the box office prospect, right? He's a guy who's going to sell tickets and jerseys. If you're working in the marketing sales department of the Leafs, you got to be licking your chops at this first overall pick because out of all the prospects of this year, yeah, I know the prospect people are saying McKenna isn't the clear number one. He's not streets ahead of a guy like Stenberg or even maybe even some of the defensemen. I heard I've seen clips on Twitter saying like the Leafs may want to take a defenseman because in Chaika's press conference he talked specifically about the defense being slow, right, and kind of needing a refresh on the defense. McKenna is again the box office prospect. They're gonna take. Like I said, I'm still hoping up. Chaika is known to galaxy brain this stuff, right? He does not have the best drafting record when he was with the Coyotes. Maybe he does some, one of his padded weird MRI scans on the brain of McKenna and determines, the wavelengths don't add up in terms of he doesn't have good enough hockey IQ or whatever, or his brain's showing he still needs to mature a bit. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm holding out for. That my heart says the Leafs will fuck it up and pick someone other than McKenna. My gut tells me they're gonna pick McKenna.
Yeah, they probably will. Like, I don't see how they fuck that one up.
It's possible. It's John Chaika.
It is possible. I mean, McKenna, for all we know, could go in there and be like, I don't like Wendy's. And they'll be like, all right, fuck you. We're going to Stenberg. Stenberg might
Yeah,
appreciate my company more.
his first John Chaika's first question on the prospect is, "What's your go-to combo at Wendy's?"
It could be. We're laughing about it now, but to break the ice, you might ask some stupid shit like that.
If you don't say spicy chicken, I'm not drafting you.
Oh, okay.
But
But
yeah,
I mean, okay, to go off what Nick was saying though in the last like little bit there of talking about how it might be rigged and whatnot, like I get what you're saying, Tanbeer, but at the same time, when the Islanders drafted first overall, and there wasn't like a prospect out there that stood out name wise. They had obviously like Schaefer was like the
In
number.
hindsight, it should have been like we should have been talking more about Schaefer, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think because he didn't play that much in his draft year, he also got injured like in the very beginning of the World Juniors, so he didn't have that traditional, bump that you get
Mhm.
at the World Juniors, right? So
Yeah, and I mean like teams weren't like this year you had people on Twitter saying tank for McKenna, tank for McKenna. I didn't see anyone say tank for Schaefer. Like he just didn't bring that pop that McKenna does, right? So you can kind of understand it from that like a scenario how the league might like rig it in Toronto's favor. Like this is kind of reminding me of when the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic. Sure, they got back Anthony Davis and a couple other pieces, but they just lost their superstar. And then they win the draft lottery, and now they have Cooper Flag on their team, which is going to be he's going to be a player for a long, long time. So it just kind of reminded me of that. But I could see why Nick you think they did rig it. I mean, it hurts as a Canucks fan. Fucking 8 home wins or whatever the fuck it was, raising ticket prices, just so much off ice bullshit. So it hurts. And when the balls were in our favor, like when our odds jumped up from like 18% to 27.9%. Me and all my friends were like, yo, 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 like there's hope, there's hope, there's hope. And then when we see the ball, we're like, the fucking Leafs. It was just the whole scene in general, and like the way that the commentary team was like, look at Matt Sundin, he's smiling ear to ear. Like they just didn't hide the excitement at all. It was fucking, it was stupid.
the hardest part of it all was, first off, seeing the Canucks get fucked. Like, that was brutal. Like, the first thing I thought was, yeah, it's the Leafs, but it also is like, of course, the Canucks weren't going to win this thing. Why did I even ever have hope for it? And then they cut to Hockey Night in Canada after the broadcast, and you could just tell Ron McLean is smiling like he can't
Oh yeah,
hold.
the coverage of the Leafs winning the draft lottery has been nauseating from these
Yeah,
so-called
Yeah.
national networks.
yeah. Well, they had
TSN, I switched over to TSN afterwards because I wanted to watch one of the basketball games, and they got like all their guys like just openly cheering for the Leafs to get the first overall pick on there. Like, what's going
it.
on?
It was tough to watch Bieksa on there, even talk like obviously Bieksa can't be a bias,
Doesn't
national.
stop all these other Toronto guys from being
Yeah,
biased.
Yeah.
he's very. You could tell he's very professional in what he does. But he even tried to talk about, telling, trying to walk Canucks fans off the cliff kind of thing, saying that, there's a possibility you might get Stenberg. And I still don't believe that's going to happen. I still think that San Jose is a smart enough organization to realize that Stenberg's just, the second best player available, and you just take him and then you figure out your defense later. Um, and like it was just so hard to watch that after I couldn't even watch hockey after that. Like I couldn't even watch the Colorado and Minnesota game because they were showing Quinn Hughes 100 times on my broadcast too, and then I was just like, I hate being a Canucks fan, but Um, the funny thing is my wife's actually from Toronto, and before the draft lottery, hours before, she messaged me saying, um, Maple Leafs to win the draft lottery, plus 950. And I responded back saying, save your money, honey. And I was just like, at least if I told her to bet the nine plus 950, we would have, maybe won a few dollars. But yeah, just for the Canucks in general, man. Like I I'm okay with picking three. It's been 24 hours now, and I'm okay with picking third. And because at the end of the day, like I even said this on the podcast last week, Nick, just because you get Gavin McKenna doesn't mean all your problems are solved. And the Canucks have so many issues that go beyond just having talent, right? The culture is a mess. They don't. First off, they don't have any talent on any position on their team. Defense, wingers, goaltending, centers, right? Yeah, you can maybe make an argument for the defense a little bit with Zeev and Wielander and stuff, but I ultimately believe the Canucks need talent all over their roster, not just on the ice but off the ice. Like such a mess. And this is year one of a probably almost a 10-year process. And as much as I would have loved for it to start off with Gavin McKenna and, we got the first overall pick and this is something that we could build with to start, it doesn't mean that we can't build with that third overall pick. And
Not at all. No, you're right. Yeah.
and that third overall pick, I don't know who's going to be. Everyone's going to like certain players. I'm okay with selecting, you know, two or three of the guys that are available after two. Um, at the end of the day, they need as many young, talented players in their organization as possible. And it doesn't just start with the draft this year, but it starts with the drafts the following years as well. And they're going to be a bad team next year. They're not going to have a Stenberg and McKenna just join their team next year and help them get 10 to 15 more points than they did this year, right? It's probably going to be very similar team than it was this year. Maybe they have a few more points because it's a pretty bad year for the Canucks. But at the end of the day, they're not going to have a superstar talent coming up from the draft this year, helping them win games, which is actually might be the best case scenario for this team, right? Maybe another high pick. I don't even want to think about Landon Dupont, to be honest, because I don't think the Canucks are ever going to get lottery luck.
No
But
chance.
top five pick again. Just keep building, keep stacking up these players in your prospect pool, and eventually it'll turn around if you have good process. And that's the only thing I could hope for as a Canucks fan. Like it was a pipe dream, anyways. Thinking that we were going to get McKenna, I always believed that the guy that you pick in the top three this year is very important, but not just that pick is important. The picks after that pick are very important. The Minnesota pick and the two second round picks that you have in this year's draft are very, very important pieces. And those pieces, if you could hit one more guy in between 27 and 40, if you could just hit one more good player, if you could get a top six winger or a top six center or a top four defenseman in one of those picks there, or even care to like maybe dream and maybe you hit a top line winger or a top pair defenseman or whatever. If you could hit on one of those guys there because your scouting staff did its homework and they picked the right guy, that could be a game changer for this team for the foreseeable future. And that's my mindset right now. I don't want to be down. I was down after yesterday. I don't know how you couldn't, but after a good night's rest and just thinking about it, it's
Couple of
not
beers to drink away the pain.
it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, I think a couple of things um, to build off that. First of all, the draft when Montreal had the first overall pick, people forget like it was very much Shane Wright, Shane Wright, Shane Wright all up until that year, right? And
Yeah,
Montreal kind of went off the board at the time and took Uri Slavkovsky first overall, right? I'm not saying something similar could happen this year with Toronto, but maybe that does happen. Maybe, everyone's saying McKenna, 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 they go off the board, they take like a Stenberg or someone else, and then maybe, McKenna falls to the Canucks at three. Hey, it could happen. It could happen. It could happen. I'm not saying it's going to. It's a possibility. And I'll also say, I don't know if you saw Frank Saravalli's mock draft this morning. Yeah, McKenna going third to the Canucks. You had Stenberg one and one
I
of the
don't.
defensemen second, and McKenna. So I'm just saying there. But I mean, I'll put it to you guys. Who do you guys think the Canucks are going to take with this third overall pick? Now they're locked in, right? From where I'm sitting, it sounds like the winds are blowing to Caleb Mahotra, right? Like that seems like he's the guy the Canucks are super high on with that third pick. It's the if the draft goes as we think, which the Ken Stenberg or what some other combination, right?
Yeah.
think, do you want to go first, Timber?
There you go.
Okay, I think yeah. I mean, just to go off what Timber was saying the last little bit. I mean, it was kind of obvious like Canucks were gonna pick third. As much as we hope for McKenna, the big name prospect, finally Canucks land after missing out on Celebrini, Bedard, two local boys. You get a Western boy in McKenna. It sucked, but ultimately we knew that we were gonna get a player no matter what. A really strong player at that. So at three, I think, yeah. I mean, ultimately. Caleb Malhotra probably would be my pick just because, you need multiple things in a championship winning team, and center is like up at the utmost important because if your centers are like really, really good, that's just setting up your team for success. And I think Caleb Malhotra, late riser, but he's killing it right now, and he's only gonna grow better. He's a Malhotra, so his IQ and his athletic genes are just gonna be through the roof. Um, but then you also have, Carson Karros, who's a left shot, but he's just a Canadian boy who wants to win in Canada, and those types of players you can't pass up on either. Chase Reed's obviously a strong option, right-handed defenseman. Keen Verhoff, the
No,
smoke is.
I don't want Chase Reed.
I mean,
It gives too much Quit Hughes vibes.
I,
Talented
I
American defenseman, like no,
I get
no,
what you're
I'm
saying.
out. I'm
I
out.
get what you're saying, but as a prospect, he probably is the second or first best defensive prospect. Kane Verhoff, the smoke was there earlier in the year, but that kind of fell off. But I will say, I think Malhotra's the pick here. It all depends on San Jose though, because San Jose they could take a defenseman and then we get Stenberg in our lap, and then you have a decision to make. Would you take Stenberg or would you take Malhotra? But ultimately, assuming that they take Stenberg at number two, I'd say you take Caleb Malhotra and then just go from there. But next year, I will say next year's class is very forward heavy, so I don't know if that'll change their mind at all, but I'm going Malhotra at three.
I think Malhotra is where the wind is blowing, right? Like I think there's conversations out there, probably in the Canucks office that that's the guy that we should take because he plays the center position, which is very important, and he's like if you look at his numbers, like they're very very impressive, especially down the stretch. In the most important time of the year, 26 points in 13 playoff games. That's impressive for sure. But like I think you just take the best player available. And I do believe Malhotra is the best player available. Like in my opinion, I think I would take him at three. But if there is a scenario there where San Jose does take a defenseman and Stenberg falls in your lap, you can't pass up on Stenberg. And I'm okay with them passing up on Malhotra for a defenseman too. Like
I
just
know,
because,
I agree. They're too early in the process to be thinking for positional need, right?
yeah,
Everyone's talking about San Jose maybe picking the defenseman with that second pick is because they, had a bunch of high picks for years in a row, right? And they have a ton of good young forwards, right? That's not where the Canucks are. So I think most people would, I think you poll most Canucks fans, just say, just take the best player available. But that's not how this, franchise operates, right? Like, let's be honest, they picked Tom Willander back, a few years ago because there was a glaring need in the prospect pool for a defenseman. That's why they picked Willander. And like, he's also, he's been pretty decent, but time will tell. But they passed on some pretty decent forwards, like a Zach Benson type. So, and he had a great game tonight in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which we'll talk about, I'm sure a bit later. But I agree. Just take the best player available. It's
yeah,
not that hard.
they're not far along enough in the rebuild where they could start taking for positional need. Right now, they just need as many good young players in their system as possible. And even though I believe Malhotra is the best player available, sometimes drafting for positional need, you could mess up on that. Like like we saw them do it with Oli Levy a few years ago, and that one still hurts, right? They didn't take Chuck because they took Vertanen the year before. Like, what kind of logic is that? You're in the beginning of your rebuild stages, and you didn't want to. Like, I really believed that they were going to take the Chuck. When I heard London Knights, I was like, they're taking the Chuck. Like, how did they not take that guy? At the end of the day, though, like they have to just draft who they believe is the best player available, and if that is Mahotra, you take him. The thing with Mahotra is a lot of people are scared off by him because he's risen in the rankings so significantly that it's almost like, how the fuck did that happen? Right? Like he was projected to be a second round pick at the start of the year, and he's just just rocketed up the rankings because he's been playing out of his mind, and he didn't just start on the first line and on his team. He started on the fourth line, and he played so well on the fourth line. The coach had no choice but to start playing him higher in the lineup. And next thing you know, this guy's the best player on the team by playoff time. And that's like one of the most stacked teams in junior hockey. They had the Caleb Dillon, not Caleb Dillon, the French guy that Utah selected. I can't say
Oh,
it.
Rainy,
Caleb Deso, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rainy,
yeah, I know who
yeah.
you're talking about. Yeah.
oh, whatever his name is. And they also had Jake O'Brien, who were really high draft picks, by the way. But by the end of it, he was the one that was the best player on that team, right? So, as a guy that hasn't even been drafted in the NHL, who's 17 years old, who's got 8 months on Stenberg, he's 8 months younger than Stenberg. So, imagine 8 more months of development for this kid, right? And you're already seeing him just rocket up the boards because he just gets better and better and better and better. I think there's something to be excited about there. Because, like, I would, there's been a lot of years in the past where a player was supposed to go first overall and they drop in the rankings for whatever reason because their season wasn't good enough, right? And a lot of the times it was sort of justified for why they didn't go higher than they were projected to go at the start of the year. Shane Wright was one of them, right? Shane Wright was supposed to go first overall to start the season, and then his season wasn't impressive enough, and Montreal decided to not take him and took the guy that was playing better, right? I think they made the right decision. Wouldn't you say? Like,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like, and I think one of the other guys that I remember was Sean Couturier. I remember Sean Couturier was supposed to be a first overall pick. He didn't have a good year in his draft year, and he slid all the way to eighth overall. I don't remember who went first overall in that draft, but I remember that he
I
was
think that was the Ryan Nugent Hopkins year.
yeah, and he was supposed to be first overall, I'm pretty sure, but he ended up dropping all the way down to eighth. So again, like Caleb Mahotra, like I think he's going to be a good player. I really do believe it. If you watch his highlights, you can see the skills and talent that he has. But that's ultimately up to the Canucks to decide who that player is. And development is huge. The one thing I love about Caleb Mahotra, guys, is he's going to BU. He's going to college. He's going to play college hockey next year. And that's a great place for him to continue developing.
Another thing I want to just mention about Caleb Malhotra is that, like, a lot of these players who are late risers or whatever per se, their stats look good. That's why they're so high. I mean, look at the Ruck Twins. They're still projected very late, like first round picks, right? Or, one of them's, I can't even remember who's who, but one of them's first rounder, second rounder. But Caleb Malhotra, there's something that all these hockey guys see because every scouting thing I've seen, every mock draft from these people that watch hockey just for a living, they have Malhotra ranked in the top five at least. I haven't seen a mock where he's outside the top five. So there's got to be some intangibles there that you can work off of. His game is going to be super translatable to the NHL. So I think there really is something to be excited about. And yeah, like you said, the 8 months of development that he's going to get, and then obviously playing in college. Like if we take Malhotra, just watching his development is going to be exciting. And let's see if he has a role on Team Canada in a few years.
Yeah, I think the other thing about Malhotra, if they do pick him, is we're finally going to get an answer to, what they're going to have to do with Manny Malhotra, right? Because, all the reports saying if they take Caleb, then Manny's not going to be, their next head coach if they do make a coaching change, right? Which, I mean, I found that whole I find the whole conversation between, oh, they can't do it to Caleb and Manny, the head coach, right? His dad's the head coach. I mean, there's situations where, players have been, coached by their dads, right? It's not uncommon, and maybe, but I would say, just again, we're talking about process and take the best player available. If Manny Malhotra is the best coaching candidate in your mind, just hire the guy, right? And then worry about it. And it's not like, man, if they do take Kellen Malhotra, right? He's not going to be on the team next year. I think we know he's already committed, like Camber said, he's already committed to BU, and he will not be on the team for next year and maybe even the year after that, right? There's no guarantee he's going to be, on the, and who knows what happens in, 2 to 3 years. Maybe Manny Malhotra is not even the coach of the Canucks anymore, right? Like, there's a lot of coaching turnover in NHL these days. So I think, if they do take Malhotra, as at least everyone on this podcast expects, right? If he's available at the third overall pick, I mean, I don't care if they take it. If Manny Malhotra is the best coach, hire him. Not that hard.
I agree, but at the same time, like I think you could find a really good coach outside of the organization that isn't somebody's dad, right? Like I understand what you're trying to say, but I do believe that now that they are picking third, they are probably having these discussions about should we just keep Foot? Like, 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 if Foot wasn't going to be here, I think he'd probably be gone by now, right? The reality is, I think keeping Foot for one more year is not a bad idea. Like, and I'm not saying, we all know he's not the greatest coach in the world, but at the same time, he didn't really have the chance to actually prove himself. Like, let's try to be fair here. Like, let's be fair to Adam Foote here. Like, he didn't really have an opportunity to be the best version of himself. And if the best version of himself still sucks, right, then you can make that decision during the season. But I think he deserves the opportunity to be coaching this team at least to start the year. And let's see what this young team can do under Adam Foote. There's going to be no distraction about Quinn being here anymore, right? The distractions are going to be gone. It's just going to be a fresh start, right? Maybe the only distraction that's going to be a part of the organization is Elias Pettersson, but even that distraction is basically gone because everyone knows what he is now, right? So I just believe that if you could just give him one more year on this team, and he could help the Canucks possibly pick in the top five again, that's the best case scenario for this team. I really do believe that. And whether that means Manny Malhotra is no longer a part of the organization, that's fine. There's great coaches out there to find that you could hire that are not named Manny Malhotra. Like I think there's a lot of great coaches out there that you could, Jay Woodcroft being one, right? There's tons of great coaches. So don't worry about hiring Manny just because you might feel like he's the best candidate. There's great candidates out there, I think.
So for Manny Malhotra, the thing is like he just has Canucks ties. It's easy for them to say that, he look at him, he won the Calder Cup with the Abbotsford Canucks, right? He's developed these players that are currently with the team right now. And he's one of like the smartest hockey minds around. Like you don't really hear a bad thing about Manny Malhotra. He has experience behind a bench. So I wouldn't, I'd be, and it's something like right now, like you have to sell this fan base on something. So I feel like if they brought Manny in, the fan base would be sold on it because obviously the Canucks ties, like I mentioned. However, ultimately, you're right, Tambir. There is, a lot of other good coaching options out there. Don't just be lazy and hire within. Explore more like they're doing with this GM process, right? They're handing her it thoroughly. They're actually making sure everything's like legit. There's 5 people on a Google Doc, which still sounds ridiculous to me. But just make sure the process is right because the next part of this Canucks franchise is going to be huge, and we can't really fuck it up.
Well said. I guess, yeah. I guess we can move on to more Canucks talk in terms of the GM search. I know it's the ultimate, dick punch that the Leafs won it, but in a way, it's nice that the draft order is set, and we could start mocking drafts, and talk a bit more concretely in terms of the NHL draft coming up, right? Not a lot more hypotheticals left, but other than obviously who they're going to pick. The big news for Canucks GM search is Pierre Dorian almost getting hired, and then the Canucks getting bullied online to not hire him in like a 24-hour period. I think we get like my speculation is you know Pierre Dorian probably told him like, hey, I can turn this around in 2 years, right? And that's why he was considered for the job, right? Like in no situation should Pierre Dorian be you know hired as a GM. Like I know like, oh, he turned around the Ottawa Senators. Like, are the Ottawa Senators like a franchise you aspire to be like? Like they have some nice pieces, but as of right now, they're getting steamrolled in the first round every year, and their captain might leave. Like you're kind of you Pierre Dorian getting hired would just be reliving the Benning era, and no Canucks fan wants to go through that again. So it sounds like you know if you believe some of the reports, he's still on the short list, but he's not the front runner on the short list. What are your guys' thoughts on the whole GM search? And is it a bad thing that they're taking this long? Because original reports were saying that they wanted to have someone in place by the draft lottery, which was obviously yesterday. That obviously has not been the case. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like, them being bullied out of Pierre Dorian was amazing. Like I think that was necessary for this fan base to, finally get behind something together and not fighting about something, split, a lot of the times back in the day, Canuck fans would be split, but it felt like every Canuck fan was on board when it came to that Doran news coming out. And now Gary Mason of the Globe reported that it's like he's got no shot at really getting that job anymore based off what the reaction was. So that's like Canuck fans did a pretty good job there. Um, but yeah, when it comes to the remaining candidates that are still being looked at by the Canucks, I think you got Jamie Langenbrunner, Evan Gold, Ryan Johnson. I'm missing a few other names, but I don't mind the process that they've gone through. I don't, but it feels like, Nick, that they want to hire the guy that tells them that they could turn it around fast, right? Even with Rutherford now, like basically saying that he's no longer going to be the president of hockey operations. He literally came out and said that after the draft lottery yesterday. And there was an article today by IMAC saying that Rutherford's actually going to be leaving Vancouver and be living in North Carolina again for the remainder of his pretty much the remainder of his life, I guess. Like, so he's not going to be back here in Vancouver anymore either. That suggests to me that maybe the owner and Rutherford probably didn't align with what they wanted, and now he's just gonna just stay in an advisor's role and just collect a paycheck. And there's rumors out there as well, Nick, and I don't know if you even thought about it the way some fans have, that maybe it was Rutherford that leaked out that Dorian news just so
If he
he,
did, he's a hero. He's did one
Yeah.
last good thing on the way out.
I really do believe he did because it was Dreger that reported it, and Dreger is Rutherford's guy, right? I think their brother. I think Dreger is like his brother-in-law or whatever.
Wasn't he
So
Dave Noah's cousin too?
something like that. But it's like it felt like it was done by Rutherford to leak, and then the reaction got out there, and then ownership had no choice but to be like, "Oh, he's not even a part of the discussion anymore," right? So it's like,
Which is always it was a great backtracking because if you're not interested in the guy, why are you paying to fly him out to
yeah,
interview him, right? It's ridiculous.
yeah. So I don't know where this search is going to go. I really don't. I would love for them to hire a guy like Evan Gold, who has a history of doing good things in Boston. Providence Bruins 50 plus wins this year. They made a trade that was significant for the Bruins organization, even though it didn't work out in the lottery because the Leafs ended up winning their lottery. But trading Brandon Carlo for a top 7 protected pick, basically a first round pick, and getting Fraser Minton as well. That's literally an example of a trade that would possibly help the Canucks move Hronek, right? What is like that's something that gold could be like to ownership. Look what I turned Brandon Carlo into. Hronek's even a better defender than him, a right shot defenseman as well, a top pairing guy. Imagine what I could get back in return for him, and that might make him, the ownership sort of, maybe like him as a candidate. But we don't know where it's going to go. I actually have no clue. Like I don't. If I were to pick who the Canucks are going to choose as a general manager, I'd still say Ryan Johnson. But I'm
Who
praying.
are you a member of the Canucks media? Because everyone in Canucks media loves Ryan Johnson.
Well, I don't want Ryan Johnson, but I'm praying for Evan Gold. Like I am
Yeah.
praying for Evan Gold. Like Ryan Johnson seems to me as someone that is going to come in and he's going to have the same philosophies as the regime that just left, right? Because he's been a part of it. He's been a part of the discussions, right? So he might feel like Hronek is worth keeping here and making captain of the Vancouver Canucks. A new guy comes in and he might feel differently and be like, we could get something for this guy that could help us down the road. And it makes absolutely no sense for the Canucks to keep Hronek, especially in year one of their rebuilding process, right? Like zero, it makes zero sense. So that's why I want someone new eyes, new brain, new philosophy. Like, and that's why I'm praying for Evan Gold, but I feel like it's going to be Ryan Johnson.
Yeah, I mean the GM search, I quite like how it's going, and like to piggyback off of what you're saying, culture is a big thing here in Vancouver that we're trying to change it up. And bringing someone from a, winning organization would certainly do that. However, about Ryan Johnson, like I get what you're saying, Tanvir, but at the same time, when you look at Patrick Allvin, our head manager, it's like how much control did he really have, right? And then you look at Ryan Johnson, he's an assistant GM, so how much control is he really gonna have if our main GM didn't really have that much control? But yeah, I ultimately would like someone from a different organization. Evan Gold, I think, would be at the top of the list for me. But then they interviewed someone today who is very interesting. Martin Madden Jr. He was a scout with Carolina when Rutherford was there. He works with the Ducks currently. He has an MBA in finance and a degree in engineering. And these guys, I don't know for what reason, these guys just know how to manage a team. These guys just do the right things, and like the fact that we're interviewing someone like that just tells me like, okay, like they're taking this seriously, which they should, and they're doing it thoroughly. And like as crazy as this next thing is that I'm about to say, like I kind of feel bad for Rutherford in this because it sounds like the people he's bringing up to Aquilini are like the smart people that you want to hire. It's just the ownership is sold on these people who want to build it up quickly, like Timer mentioned. But ultimately, I think the GM process it's very crucial during a rebuild because you want this GM to, be here for the long run. You want him to be investing in these prospects that are gonna hopefully make the Canucks a consistent perennial playoff team, right? So, I like the way they're doing it, and I just prefer that they don't take the easier on go Ryan Johnson. But we'll see.
I think another thing we need to keep in mind is, if Rutherford's gone, does that mean they are hiring, a president of hockey ops now? In the past, it seems like they wanted one guy to do everything. Does this mean they kind of want two guys now? Because I think, part of the reason I think Pierre Doran was there is it seems like, the ownership, they really want someone who has GM experience, right? They're kind of gun shy about hiring another rookie GM, right? If you get like a president of hockey ops guy, right, and ahead of the GM, does that help with, wanting to hire, a first time GM again? That would be one thing I would be curious about. But I do think, yeah, I think for that, what's that guy's name? Mark Madden, you brought up?
Martin Madden Jr., yeah.
Mark Madden Jr. Like, I mean, Ducks are good now, right? But they've been rebuilding for, 7 years. So that automatically, I think, disqualifies him from getting the job, right? He's going to tell him, yeah, it took us, it's going to be like a 5 to 7 year thing. And ownership's going to be like, all right, see you later. That's not what they're going to want to hear, right? So I don't think he's getting a job solely on that. But I agree. Like from what I'm reading, he's kind of like in charge of all the Ducks drafts, and they've had great drafts, right? So seems like that would be a solid hire if you could bring that knowledge um, to the Canucks. Let's move on. I think just sorry, were you want to say something, Time here?
Yeah, just piggybacking on what you said about the Ducks drafts. Leo Carlson was a controversial pick ahead of Adam Fantilli, even though it was a top two pick, right? A lot of people thought that Fantilli was a clear cut second ranked prospect in that class. But it seems like Leo Carlson, watching him do what he's doing in the playoffs, it's like seems like it was the right pick. They also took Beckett Seneke at third overall. That was also a controversial pick at third overall. People were shocked that they took him that high, but they took him. And then also the one that nobody talks about in the media, Jackson Lacombe. I think second round pick, one of the best. I think one of the best defensemen in the league today, maybe a top 10 defender actually. Nobody talks about him, but he's a great pick as well. So, like I always like to compare good teams to that Chicago Blackhawks dynasty, right? You know, the dynasty that won 3 cups in 6 years or whatever. And everyone says you need that generational talent. You need that generational talent, but they did it without the generational talent. They built a really strong team with young studs, good drafting, and good free agent signings like Hossa and Sharp and all that, right? That turned out to build a really good Stanley Cup contender year over year over year. And there was a lot of turnover that happened during that period when they won their first cup to their second cup to their third cup, right? Guys like Brian Bickle came out of nowhere. Brandon Saad came out of nowhere, right? Chris Versteegs and all that, right? That's what builds successful organizations. You have to hit on draft picks, not just in the first round, top 10 picks, but you have to hit in the later rounds, second and third round picks. And today, hearing the news that they might have an overhaul of their scouting staff gives me some hope, but also it's the wrong time to do it. Right? Like you got the draft coming up, one of the most important drafts in the history of the franchise, and there's uncertainty with the scouting staff, right? That worries me a little bit, but let's be honest, guys. The scouting in this organization needs to change from the pros and the amateur level because the Vancouver Canucks have not hit on anybody, have not hit on many prospects outside the first round. Like I can't name you a Jason Robertson type or you know, or a Sebastian Aho type like prospect they've hit in a while. I think the last one they hit in the later rounds or second round or third round or whatever was Alexander Edler, and how much of a significant piece he was for that Canucks team when they were going to the finals. He was a massive piece of that team. A guy like Yannick Hansen picked in the seventh round. A guy like Kevin Bieksa picked in the third round. A guy like Mason Raymond picked in the second round, right? A lot of Alexander Burrows, right? Like unsigned free agent or East Coast Hockey League signing, basically. Those are the types of moves that will take you to where you need to go. And the Canucks haven't had that since that era. And I don't know what changed, but they need to figure that out because if they want to be a successful organization again, scouting, drafting is everything. Because if you're drafting the right players and they're coming up together at the same time, that's going to build a culture. That's going to build a standard, right? Competitiveness of players fighting for jobs, players fighting for spots on the team. And the Canucks haven't had that. They're bringing players in from other organizations and they're not living up to it because they signed the big deal and they're like, I got my money. There's no when you get drafted by a team, it's different. It feels like you growing up in a house that you've been living in your whole life, right? It feels different sleeping in that bed compared to going to a hotel or sleeping, right? That's how the Canucks need to look at things: draft, develop, just continue doing that. And I bet you, just from doing that and fixing that, the Canucks will be a respectful organization again.
Well said, Dambier, as always. Let's quickly wrap this up by just talking some Stanley Cup playoffs. So Shane Bryan isn't on this episode because I would love to hear his thoughts on the Oilers getting knocked out by the Ducks as the number one Oilers fan in Vancouver. But yeah, there's been some teams being eliminated and second round series starting since we last recorded. Obviously, Edmonton Oilers out, Boston Bruins out. At the time that we last recorded, we only had the Carolina Philly series kind of wrapped up, but now it's Carolina Philly, and that one series is looking like it's looking like another short one for Carolina, right? Avs and Wild. I mean, Avs are again just showing they're the sort of the cream of the crop right now in the playoffs, and Wild are a really good team, but the Avs are on a different level. The Ducks Vegas series, as of recording right now, Ducks are up 1-0 heading into the third period, so we'll see how that game goes. But again, I've always believed in earning your scars and playoff scars before you take that next step. And Vegas showed in that first game, why they have that playoff experience, right? And Montreal, Buffalo got started today. I mean, that seemed like a letdown spot always for me for Montreal, right? A super emotional 7 game series. They not that much rest heading into Buffalo. They came out flat. I expect them to be better in game 2, but Buffalo's looking good as well, right? So Tanbeer, I guess we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, Carolina, Philly, you mentioned that series is going to be short. I did have it being a 5 game series, if I'm not mistaken. I switched it up to 6 games in some of my pools, but it's just it's a tough matchup for Philly, right? The Carolina Hurricanes are battle tested. They've gone far in the playoffs before. I thought Philadelphia actually deserved a better fate in game 2. They all played them in the overtime, but that's not how hockey goes sometimes. We saw Montreal Canadiens get outplayed by the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 7, and it didn't matter. We saw the USA get outplayed by Canada in the gold medal game, and it
And
didn't
what do those 2 games have in common? John Cooper on the losing side.
exactly. So hockey sometimes doesn't go the way you think it will go, and that's why that's why Philadelphia is probably cooked because they probably played their best game of the series in Game 2, and
Yeah. That
if
game
now
seemed like a critical turning point in the series, right? If they're tied up heading back home, they have life. Now, they're on life. Not that they're dead. Tons of teams come back from 2-0 series deficits every all the time in the playoffs, right? There's usually the Stanley Cup playoffs traditionally usually good for one of those. So
yeah,
they're not dead, but it's looking tough for they got to win game 3 essentially,
for
right? You win, you lose game 3, you're pretty much cooked.
And then when it comes to Colorado, Minnesota, I feel the same way about that one. Colorado's just a far superior team. Minnesota's depth down the middle is showing. They don't have enough of it, and in order to win in this league, you need centermen, and they don't. And Eriksson Ek is hurt. That makes a difference, right? It's just going to be too much to overcome. And then, Buffalo, Montreal got started today, and that series is going to go 7. I'll tell you that series is going to go 7. I have no doubt about it. And I think that Montreal, I think, is probably the better overall team. But Buffalo just keeps on chugging along, and they seem to win games in any way possible. And then the last series that I didn't mention yet is Vegas and Anaheim. And game 1, I thought Anaheim was a better team. They outplayed them. They outshot them. Carter Hart's been looking like the best goalie in the playoffs so far. Um, another opportunity blown by the Oilers, I guess. But yeah, like Vegas again, they're losing right now to the Ducks. And from watching that first period that I watched, again, the Ducks were the better team. So and the one thing I've noticed with Joel Quenneville teams, they just beat the Oilers in 6 games. If you just look at the history of Joel Quenneville teams, they win in 6 games. They just win. The Chicago Blackhawks win in 6 games. Another thing that I noticed about Joe Quenneville teams, they always lose game 1. I don't know what it is, but they always lose game 1. So if the Ducks are in a position where they have a chance to close out the Vegas Golden Knights in 6 games, just bet the Ducks to win game 6. And if they get to the next round, right, they're losing game 1. I'm telling you right now, just look at the history of Joel Quenneville teams. I'll tell you right now, they beat the Canucks in 6 games 2 times, right? They beat the Blackhawks in 6. No, not the Blackhawks. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers in 6 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. They beat the Boston Bruins in 6 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. That's 5 times on the top of my head that they won series in 6 games. I bet you there's more that I'm forgetting that they won in 6. I'm pretty sure they beat the St. Louis Blues in 6 games a couple times back in the day as well. So just remember,
Nashville Predators in the first round, 6 games.
yeah, just remember this. Joel Quenneville teams win in 6 games, and they always lose the first game of the series.
Yeah, I'll just start off with that series, since we're already talking about it. But I think Anaheim, obviously Vegas is battle tested, they're older. And you kind of gave the longer end of the stick in terms of, beating Anaheim in the series. But I think Anaheim for me, yeah, they just went in 6 games. I think they played like the better team in game one. I think so too. They're younger, they're faster. Like Jackson Lacombe is just showing that this guy's legit, dude. Like he's big. He can just run a power play. He's so dynamic. And then you have like all those skilled forwards like Cutter Gauthier, just a sniper. They just have everything you really need in a winning team. Like Dostal has looked a little bit shaky in the last Edmonton series, but ultimately he's going to be one of the better goalies in the league for a few years. So I think that Anaheim can pull it out over Vegas. In terms of the Avalanche and Wild series, it was nice to see, Quinn Hughes get hit a few times yesterday. I won't lie, but yeah, I think the Avalanche are just a powerhouse, man. I think it's kind of just destined for them to go to the finals. Their team is just way too good. Acquiring Kadri at the deadline, like, dude, this guy is just showing like he's a stud, man. They're playing with those caliber of players, like he's just his game's only gonna grow in the series, and he's been there, done that. So I think that Colorado's gonna make this a short series. Probably I'll say 5 games. I'll give Minnesota 1 game. Same with the Kane series. Talk it, your boy Tanvir. I wasn't here to congratulate you on all the success so far, but I think Carolina's got him. Rob Moore, the winning culture in Carolina, man, it's just like it's hard to overcome for any team, right? Let alone Philly. Like Philly, people didn't even know if they were gonna make the playoffs this year. But the fact they've gone this far, is, credit to them and talk it obviously, but I just think that going up against a juggernaut like Carolina is tough for them. Um, and to talk about what series am I missing here? The Buffalo Montreal series. I think Buffalo's just riding hot, and I think they're gonna upset Montreal here. I think that series will go to 7 games, but I think that barn in Buffalo, they're just loud. They're just like it's such a hard place to play. You see what it really means to those fans who've stuck around for so long. So I think Buffalo can pull it out. Um, and I just want to quickly note that, I wasn't here when the Ducks beat the Oilers or anything, but how nice was it? At least for me. I know Nick, you probably feel the same way, but how nice was it to see McDavid and Draisaitl like the next day, just the sad look on their face, the questioning of the future, calling out the management. Like it was so nice to see. And I know Brian was probably crying like over his Bills and Edmonton Oilers, same thing. They just can't win the big games. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, my favorite part of the press conference was everyone's talking about, oh, in the aftermath, everyone's talking about, oh, McDavid's, he may demand a trade. He might be there much longer. I liked how Draisaitl's camp leaked out immediately after, like, hey, I could demand a trade too, right? Like, I could be out of here. I'm not here for 8 years just because I signed a contract, right? For an 8-year contract extension. I could ask out too. That was an underrated moment from that. Anything else you guys want to add on playoff wise before we wrap this thing up?
I just want to mention on the Edmonton Oilers part of all this, you know, it's just funny how Brian is not able to join the show the week after the
Well,
Edmonton.
I'm sure we can get his thoughts next week when he's on. We'll
Oh yeah,
have to.
we will. But I just want to mention, Brian after the Canucks lost the draft lottery comes into the spaces on X, and is like almost like gloating that the Canucks fell to three. And in that moment, I'm just like, is this guy really a Canucks fan, or is he? Because he was a lot more angry when the Oilers got eliminated in the playoff against to the Ducks than when the Canucks fell to three. At the end of the day, Brian did warn us, saying that the most likely outcome is third overall. But it's just little things like that I noticed that make me wonder if Brian is actually a Canucks fan or an Oilers fan, and he could explain himself next week. But also, I want to mention today, this afternoon, instead of hosting the spaces on our Strictly Hockey Talk account on X, Brian was in an Oilers space. So,
Commiserating. Okay.
yeah, he was. According to one of the few listeners that we have, I think one of the only listeners that we have, Siri Canuck, he was DMing me, telling me how Brian was in a Oilers space instead of hosting Canucks lunch that we host basically every day on X. Right, we do a space every day on X. We get a bunch of Canuck fans, a bunch of hockey fans, Oilers fans, Leaf fans, and they join and we talk hockey. So if anybody has X, join us during the afternoon, and we talk about what's going on in the NHL today. And Brian, for some reason, usually hosts the space because he's got the better connection. Decided to go in an Oilers space instead of hosting a Canucks lunch that we host
Disgusting.
every day. So
Disgusting.
that right there made me, a little disappointing. And Brian, I don't know what he is anymore. I don't know if he's a Canuck fan. I don't know if he's an Oilers fan. I really do question that. It's like one of the only questions that I have when it comes to hockey right now.
All right, you heard it here first, Brian. We're on to you, man. You'll have to take a loyalty test somehow next episode. But yeah, that's it for another episode of Strictly Hockey Talk. For Nick Bondi and on behalf of Katie and Tambier, enjoy the playoffs, and we'll see y'all next week.